The Boss, Bad Scooter, the single person who most embodies the spirit of American rock and roll, Bruce Springsteen. In addition to being an American icon and one of its most prominent civic voices, Bruce Springsteen is one of popular music's most fascinating artists, for a number of reasons. The first and most important reason is because he's produced an enormous amount of incredibly powerful music. The second is that he is the living embodiment of the American dream in a rock and roll context. He came out of nowhere and clawed his way to the top of the music industry by dint of sheer artistic will. The third reason, which for me as a singer-songwriter is one of the most interesting, is that his compositional style has changed quite dramatically over the years. He started out writing these incredibly verbose, incredibly technically complicated songs, which gave way to a more mechanically simple style of writing whose value hinged more on the message of the songs than their technical experimentation. Now, admittedly, as a singer-songwriter, I am quite excited by technical experimentation, but there's just something about Springsteen's sheer devotion. He is trying to write into the heart of American masculinity. He is trying to write into the unbalanced equation that people like him had to grow up under, being a member of a working class that promotes many fewer people than the American dream would lead you to think that it does. He's been so devoted for so long to writing about topics that are incredibly difficult to write about that I'm just simply in awe of the effort, the devotion, the longevity. I love Bruce Springsteen. I've learned a lot from him as a musician, a songwriter, a performer, and so just like I did for Bob Dylan, I'm going to dive into my takes on his studio albums. Depending on your level of interest, my level of interest, and your level of satisfaction with my new and improved studio setup, maybe I'll get into the more off-the-beaten-path stuff later, his live albums, his vault cleaning exercises, etc. But for now, we will start with the studio albums. Also, just like I did for Bob Dylan, I'm going to go one decade at a time, so we will start here with his 70s output. Before we get going, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my page. In addition to offering commentary on the music that has shaped me, I also share a lot of my own original music, as well as me covering the songs that I'm talking about in these videos.
I'm going back out for the rain starts a falling. I'll walk to the depths of the deepest dark forest.
Visit my channel to see and learn more. Alright, Bruce Springsteen studio album tier list. Let's go. 1. Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. I have a lot of fondness for this album. You get this a lot of the time with an artist's debut work. There are so many different styles that are present at the same time, so many different potential roads of specialization that the artist could go down, and they don't really know which one is going to be the main road yet. In the context of popular music, this album may be the best example of that. He is trying so many different things on this album all at the same time. He's got like coffee house solo acoustic songs like Mary Queen of Arkansas. He's got these elaborately arranged band songs like Does This Bus Stop at 82nd Street. He is trying to write the most Dylan-esque verbose lyrics that he possibly can. Look no further than Blinded by the Light for proof of that. He is trying to write at maximum musical complexity, maximum stylistic complexity, maximum verbal complexity, all at once. And the results are kind of mixed, you know. It's a classic case of an artist, their first time out of the gate, trying to be all things to all people. If you're a fan of poetry, he wants you. If you just want to go to a bar and have a fun time at a show, he wants you. If you want to go to a coffee house and have sort of a mellow contemplative evening, he wants you as well. There were a lot of people then, and there are a lot of people now who view this as not only admirable, but successful in its effort. I am not really one of those people. I think that it is periodically successful and often overreaching. Not necessarily even overreaching, but reaching for too many things at once. Not to say that I don't admire the adventurous, I really do. But there's a difference between admiring adventurousness and being moved by it, you know. I'm a big lyrics listener, and that lyrical complaint extends to a number of the other songs on this album. For You, Does This Bus Stop at 82nd Street, Lost in the Flood, Spirit in the Night. The lyrics are just, they're just waterlogged with alliteration and with rhyme and with, you know, sort of silly monikers for young New Jerseyans. Again, I admire the adventurousness. I'm often not moved by it. It's always interesting to do this kind of evaluation now with the full context of their discography in the rear view, because you know where they would go, and I know how Bruce Springsteen would refine these lyrical approaches over time, and I find the refinements more interesting than these first raw experiments. I see the necessity of these experiments, but I find the refinements more effective. You know, the album album also suffers a little bit from the production quality. My understanding is that Springsteen didn't want to blow all the money from his advance from Columbia Records on the production, and so he elected to record it in a less expensive studio than he might otherwise have done. And, you can hear it in the production. The production is pretty thin. The vocals in particular are not as rich and deep and large as we would come to expect and enjoy from Springsteen. And for what was really quite a raucous and energizing band, it just sounds a little dead in this room that they recorded it in. Again, I can hear the Springsteen bloodhounds barking at me when I say stuff like that. But, it's like, let's just be real about it. Like, there's so much to admire here. And there is so much that just circumstantially, both Springsteen being as young as he was and, him being in the position vis-a-vis his record company that he couldn't do to the ideal length, to the ideal extent that he would in the next couple of years. So, there's so much that I like about this album. I love the song Growin' Up. Growin' Up has a very My Back Pages quality to it. I think the lyrics there are more effective than anywhere else on the record. I like For You. I like the songs that really have heart, The other thing that I'll mention here is that most of these songs sound a lot better live than they do here in the studio. The Springsteen live album that I particularly cherish is the one from 1975, Live at the Hammersmith Odeon. In particular, Spirit in the Night and Lost in the Flood just absolutely shine on that recording. What that emphasizes to me is that this production environment was so far from the ideal production environment in which to capture these songs. There is so much of value on this album. There's so many indications of the artist that Springsteen would grow into very shortly thereafter on this album. Is it in and of itself a masterwork? No, I don't think so. Is it sort of a snapshot of embryonic genius? Yeah, I think you could argue that it is. As an artistic document isolated from the rest of his material, I think I would put this in Springsteen's B tier. 2. The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. Fascinating about this album is that it was released in the same year as Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, and to my mind, it is a giant leap up in quality in a number of different areas. Production quality is an obvious one. The album just sounds so much fuller, richer, deeper than Greetings from Asbury Park does. But then also compositionally, I find these compositions just so much more mature and focused than the compositions on Greetings from Asbury Park. I remember him saying somewhere that he was put off by the Dylan comparisons after the first album and wanted to write in a way that was more distinctively him, which I completely get. And I'm just astonished at how successful he was at doing that. Whereas Greetings from Asbury Park's songs are sort of these impressionistic landscape paintings. I know that's kind of a paradox, but go with me. Impressionistic landscape paintings of Asbury Park. This is a little bit more like a sort of hyper-realistic, hyper-detailed painting of the same scenes. With characters, with stories, all of them sort of colliding at once with each other and producing wild chemical reactions. I made the point about admiring adventurousness versus being moved by it in the previous album. I'm much more moved by it here than in Greetings from Asbury Park. The songs really are no less adventurous. I just think he chooses where to be adventurous a little bit more effectively than the last album. The last album, it's everywhere at once. This album, it's mostly in the structure of the songs, as opposed to in the lyrics of the songs as well. Rosalita Come Out Tonight is the obvious example, but really look at Wild Billy's Circus Story. It has all this sort of madcap narrative detail of a Tom Waits song, but it also has this incredible beating heart at the center of it. It's the production is really astute, really intelligent. The tuba is a really tasteful choice, and the song has just so many different musical sections in it, all of which come together to produce this incredibly coherent image of a circus. Springsteen would often introduce Rosalita as the best love song he ever wrote. And yeah, Rosalita is one of several songs on this album that produces such ecstatic emotional highs in me, and it has for a long time. Rosalita does that, the E Street Shuffle does that, 4th of July Asbury Park does that, Incident on 57th Street does that. Notably, what does not do that for me is New York City Serenade. I really don't like that song. It's an example for me of something I'm going to bring up a lot in Springsteen albums that I do not enjoy, which is the term bathos. It basically means going for a big effect and kind of missing the mark, and the big effect becomes trivial instead of sublime. New York City Serenade is a perfect example of that. I find the chantings of Listen to the Junk Man, Silly, I find the intro long and drawn out and sort of failing in its emotional reach. I don't like that song. I really don't like that song. Which is a shame because I otherwise consider this album kind of like Dubliners. Like, it's kind of a brilliant collection of short stories focused very, intently and in a detailed fashion on the author's hometown. Incredibly adventurous compositions, incredibly adventurous arrangements, most of which are so successful. And then there's just this one at the end that I think is so unsuccessful. In summary, this is the Springsteen album I've probably listened to the most times. I don't know if it's the best work start to finish, but again, this I would say is the album that is most technically experimental and successful. Asbury Park is probably a little bit more experimental, but it's less successful. This is ever so slightly less experimental, but substantially more successful. I would put this one high in Springsteen's A tier. 3. Born to Run. This is the album that turns Springsteen from an interesting minor artist into a major artist. His story does not end there. His battle for prominence did not end there. It only gets more complicated from here. This is the album that famously put him on the cover of Newsweek and Time in the same year, in the same week or something, at a time when that really meant something. Kids. Born to Run was a huge radio hit. This album vaulted him into a sort of national or international popularity that he had not really had up to that point. So this tremendously, really a turning point in his career. And it is probably the earliest example of Springsteen the legend that we have. His first two albums are incredible examples of his genius. This is where it first sort of coalesces into legendary writing, recording, performing. That's the way it's thought of, and in many cases I would say its reputation is entirely accurate. The title track is as brilliant a rock song as has ever been written or recorded. Thunder Road, likewise. 10th Avenue Freeze Out, likewise. Jungle Land, likewise. All of those songs belong in the classic rock pantheon that they generally are considered to reside in. Now, for the rest of the album, this album has some clunkers to me. I mean, I don't think this is a perfect album. I don't think it's great all the way through, honestly. I think that Meeting Across the River is kind of a dud of a song. Again, it has that kind of bathetic energy to me, where it's like trying to conjure this sort of noirish, Godfather-ish, tense gangster scene, and it just ends up feeling a little silly to me. The trumpet, I think, is ill-advised. The dialogue, I don't think, is that well-written. It's certainly nothing more evocative than in gangster films of the day. Both Night and Backstreets start to feel like generic Bruce Springsteen songs. Compare Night to the track Born to Run. Born to Run has so many different ingredients working together simultaneously. It has hope, it has desperation, it has this sort of disorienting middle section, it has this incredibly powerful production atmosphere. Night just feels like it isolates one of those variables and makes a whole song based on that. Like, just the sort of highway desperation is all I feel in Night. And it feels redundant next to the incredible consummate achievement that Born to Run is. And Backstreets likewise. Like, Backstreets is a simplified version of Jungle Land. Jungle Land is about people hiding and fighting and loving and dying on the back streets, and then Backstreets is just sort of like a very simplified distillation of Jungle Land's energy and scope. I really don't love those songs. I don't love those three songs. She's the One is the only one I haven't mentioned, and I do love She's the One. I think She's the One feels like a perfect modernization of the rock and roll that Springsteen grew up with. Anything from Bo Diddley to Elvis to the Ronettes, it feels like it so gets and grows upon the energy of that early rock and roll. I love She's the One I love. It's interesting with this one. You can track a very interesting progression from Asbury Park to The Wild, the Innocent, and Born to Run. If Asbury Park is him trying everything at once, and then The Wild, the Innocent is him sort of picking one or two things and doing those really well, Born to Run is a further distillation into what is probably the ideal Springsteen compositional style. Thunder Road is actually maybe the best example of it to me. Born to Run is the perfect version of that for a radio hit. Thunder Road, to me, is the perfect example of that, just Springsteen writ large. It's maybe his best song. It is formally interesting, it is poetically strong, it is ecstatic in its energy, it's intelligent in its production. It is the perfect leveraging of Springsteen's unique genius in all four of those realms. But I don't think this is a perfect album. I don't think it's the perfect album that people generally regard it as. I mean, when it comes time to rate this, on the one hand, the best compositions are as strong as any in Springsteen's catalog. On the other hand, it has some very weak tracks, in my view, that really make it an imperfect album. I would put Born to Run cautiously in the S tier, because it's the pinnacle of his compositional style in many ways, but it's also not a perfect album, you know. So cautiously in the S tier, I would say. 4. Darkness on the Edge of Town. It took 3 years between the release of Born to Run and this one, and largely that's because of legal disputes that Bruce Springsteen was having with his former manager, Mike Appel. And you know, it kept Springsteen on the road and out of the studio for the better part of 2 years. I can picture as a young, ambitious, hungry recording artist that being kept out of the studio for that long would just be absolutely infuriating, suffocating, constricting. So by the time he got back into the studio, he had several trunks full of songs to record for it, and he recorded a lot of songs for this album. Yeah, I mean, what we see here is almost a laughably small snapshot of the number of songs he recorded for this album. Just like Born to Run, he agonized over this album. I think he's a perfectionist in general, so his inclination is to agonize, but he really agonized over this album. And, you know, in a lot of cases pretty successfully. I think what Born to Run led us to believe Darkness on the Edge of Town confirms to be true, which is that the pinnacle of Bruce songwriting are these anthems that can be sung en masse in a stadium. Take for an example Born to Run, and take for an example Badlands. Songs with giant choruses played at a medium tempo, you know, simple melodic hooks, and that you can sing with the full volume of your American lungs. And when he carries it off successfully, it's as powerful as any singer in the history of rock and roll. When he doesn't connect, though, that mission does a lot less for me emotionally than the mission of a more poetic songwriter like Bob Dylan. And when I say poetic, what I mean is somebody who is preoccupied with linguistic experimentation. Not that Springsteen isn't writing poetic lyrics, but the goal of his poetry is different than the goal of Dylan's poetry. Dylan's poetry is constantly trying to turn language itself inside out. Springsteen's poetry is trying to shine a light into the working class factories, houses, bedrooms of America. Neither is inherently more valuable than the other in my view, but Dylan's resonates more with me as an artist and as a listener. Now, having said all that, there's still quite a bit of compositional experimentation on this album. Adam Raised a Cane is a great example of that. Springsteen's guitar parts on that album are reminiscent of I Can See for Miles. The one-note tremolo guitar solos. Adam Raised a Cane is also just a great song about fathers and sons. I mean, the energy of it is as desperate as it feels to fight with your dad when you're 16. The lyrical refrain is brilliant. You know, a man fallen from grace raises a child who has evilness inside of him, inherent in him. If you can, you should listen to that song and listen to The Promise, because the Promise is really about, if Genesis is where man falls from grace, The Promise is where Bruce Springsteen's dad falls from grace, and where the tragic evil that produced Adam Raised a Cane is born. Candy's Room, I think, is a great depiction of the desperation of lust that you kind of have nothing to do with at the moment except just seethe. The Promised Land and Prove It All Night are both great anthems. In particular, Prove It All Night is a terrific anthem. What I also like about this album is that the closing track, the title track, gives you a sort of interpretive framework for the rest of the album. In the way that the movie Badlands is kind of about suburban malaise, you know, the kind of desperation it takes to destroy suburban malaise. The way that I interpret the phrase Darkness on the Edge of Town is that's what produces that suburban malaise. You're insulated from the darkness of the land, but you're completely aware that it's there. And it makes you curious about it. And, you know, what is this sort of bizarre American experiment trying to insulate us from? Is it our nature? Is it freedom? True freedom? What exactly is out there beyond that darkness? And I want it, but I'm also terrified by it. And what happens if I step into it, etc., etc. What I'm really trying to say is that song, placed where it is, provides a really wonderful, helpful, thematically impactful interpretive framework through which to view the rest of the album. Now, again, there are some things about, there's some sort of very typically Springsteen-ish things that I don't like about this album. I'm not really a fan of Something in the Night. I find his piano ballads kind of boring. It's the same issue I have with Tom Waits. Like, I think they just sort of have this mode of slow emotional piano ballad, and it's very similar song to song. I'm aware that there are some lyrical and thematic things that distinguish Something in the Night from Racing in the Street, for example, but given the similarity of the energy, it's hard for me to feel uniquely moved by one or the other. How different is Streets of Fire from Backstreets on Born to Run? You kind of worry at this point that Springsteen is falling into compositional ruts, where he's beginning to write the same song over and over again. It's not the case on the entire album by a long shot. As I said, there are quite a few songs that I really enjoy on this album. And I would say on the whole, I really like this album. Something in the Night does not do it for me. Factory doesn't really do it for me. It's not an album that I get as much raw pleasure from as either Born to Run or The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle, but it's an album I admire very much. I admire both the idea and the success of the idea motivating it to capture that suburban sort of working class desperation. I think it does a really good job of that, with a number of anthemic Springsteen-y type moments throughout it. I would put it in his A tier, just behind The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. So yeah, it's a fascinating decade for Springsteen. You see him going from a songwriter and a composer and a producer, experimenting in every direction at once, to him really refining the vein that he wants to write into. It winds up that his most successful compositional vein is depicting the American working class, the struggle of the struggle of what it means to be a member of the American working class, and always sort of pointing his songwriting vessel at these anthemic, stadium rock songs. There's a point of view from which that's a shallow way to write. But in reality, there's nothing easy about writing those kinds of songs, and there's nothing easy about writing an arena song that people can both sing along to and their hearts can feel fulfilled by. In this decade alone, Springsteen produced a number of consummate examples of that kind of writing. Badlands, Born to Run, Jungleland, Thunder Road. The list goes on and on. A fundamental transformation that I think you can witness Bruce going through on these albums is changing the room that he's writing for. The first album is him very much writing for a coffee house atmosphere. The songs are very detailed. It's the kind of thing that you would best take in a small room where you can really focus on small details. By Darkness on the Edge of Town, he's writing for much larger rooms, which you can tell in the live performances captured from that era. A song like Streets of Fire has parts built into it that are best delivered to an audience ready to clap along to a mid-tempo beat. And I don't think it's any mistake that he wrote that song with that part in that way. Forgetting about the cultural impact or the musical impact, the artistic impact of these albums, the type of room that I most prefer is probably The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle room. I picture that being like a 100 to 200 person room, substantial enough that there's a pretty big crowd there, but still intimate enough that you can see the sweat dripping off his face. The bigger the room, the broader the strokes. That's generally the case. Somewhere between The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle and Born to Run, there's that perfect balance of detail and breadth that I think really marks the pinnacle of Bruce Springsteen composition. So that's the 70s. It's worth, if you haven't, looking a little bit into the Bruce Springsteen biography from these years. Even just reading the Wikipedia pages on these albums would give you a sense of the battle it was to record them. He went through a lot, and there were some very interesting stratagems that he and his management deployed to get the albums made and distributed in the first place. It's fascinating how much of a battle it all was. And then his 80s albums are arguably even fuller with stylistic veerings and emotional challenges and so forth. So stay tuned. This promises to be an interesting series. Thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the page if you haven't already. And I will see you next time.